All right, welcome everybody to Solve Crimes with Rick and Gavin. I am Rick Tracewa.
I'm Gavin Fish. We're glad you're here tonight. We're actually pretty darn surprised at this, Rick. This is something that we never in a million years would have expected to happen on the channel.
No, not at all. I mean, it's we're thrilled and kind of we're a little bit taken aback, I would say. I mean, wouldn't expect this. I mean, so we started the channel and we hoped that it would stir things up, especially with 50-year-old cases when there's very little chance of having anybody, caught, considering the lack of DNA back then and that kind of stuff. But we started out, funny enough, with this case, the Judith Hakari case. And so we started out with that one, and it was a 50-year-old case. We've covered it very well, and we thought we were done with it.
Yeah, we sure did.
Something new happened, right?
Yeah, we thought that we were done with it. I think before we really get into this and what it is that has happened, maybe, first of all, if you're new to our channel and you like this content, you think we've earned it, please subscribe to our channel. That is one way that you can really help us out. Be sure to click the notification bell to be notified whenever we go live or whenever we post videos. The topic that we're talking about tonight is the case of Judith Ann Hakari. It is a case, like Rick said, that is 50 years old. It actually turns 51 on the 7th of next month. So we're about a month out from that. And it's a case that really has kind of made it into the pop culture of 1970s Northern California murder cases, hasn't it, Rick?
Yeah, it's it's interesting. When we first took this case or decided to take this case, you're the master researcher, but when you went out to look for stuff, what did you find?
I couldn't find anything. It was almost impossible to find. We did find small, like 1 or 2 sentences on some websites from people who are enthusiastic about trying to find the Zodiac Killer. But other than that, we couldn't find any details on it, nor could we find any really good images of her or anything like that.
Yep. And that's kind of what we, between the two of us, hoped, was that at the very least, if we don't solve some of these really older cases, that at the very least, when someone searched for Judith Ann Hakari, they would find a bunch of information. And we've definitely achieved that. And I'm super proud of that. I know you are too.
Yeah. And, people who don't know us very well, that kind of is our thing, right? In our regular professional life, we do marketing and SEO and so forth. And so we thought, let's put our skills to work here so that just in case anybody has any information about or curiosity about the case, they will be able to find her. And now when you go to Google and you do any search relating to Judy Hakari, you will find every piece of information that has been published about her.
And that is actually a perfect segue into the topic tonight, because that has happened several times on this case. And this new one is the granddaddy of them all. We just recently, we received a clue tip from our website. We have a clue tip form, and almost fell out of my chair. And the clue tip form said, "My name is Rex, and I am the only eyewitness to the abduction of Judy Hakari."
Remember our reaction to that? That was, there's
never been a word about that.
Yeah, there's no indication anywhere that there was an eyewitness to the abduction of Judy Hakari. Now, on our channel, and actually on the playlist, this live stream is on a playlist that is the 50-year-old case of Judith Ann Hakari. There are 4 episodes where we get into great detail about the case, and then there are a couple of other episodes where we kind of add supporting information like connections to other cases in the area, and we even interviewed the son of Judy's then fiance, the fiance at the time of her death.
Yeah, if you're a new subscriber to us and you've never heard of this case, definitely go back and watch some of the videos, and they are numbered, so you can go back and watch them. But this took us by surprise. I mean, I've had like phone calls and meetings with the lead detective on this case.
Correct.
Zero. There's never been a mention of an eyewitness. And as it turns out, this man Rex, because most everybody is either in their 70s or 80s or has passed on, that were around back then in 1970 as an adult. As it turns out, Rex was 12 years old at the time, and he was Judy's paperboy.
Yeah, so maybe what we can do is just walk through. This is, by the way, this is Judy Hakari's high school, her senior photo. The photo that we showed before, I'll go back to it. This photo was taken the day that she disappeared. This was her engagement photo. She went to go have it taken, and then she was gone that night. So just very briefly, Judy Hakari was a nurse in Sacramento, California, and she had a late shift at the hospital where she worked, and she just disappeared. About, what was it, Rick? About 1 a.m. that Ray found her.
He found her car, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was about 1:30. He'd been waiting for her in her apartment, and according to everything, he had gone down at about 1:30 and found her car with the door open and her keys on the floorboard, and he knew something was wrong.
At that point, he called police, and a search kind of ensued, and it took weeks and weeks. Family offered reward for anything leading to, finding Judy, and eventually, after a long time, they discovered that they discovered her body in a town up in the Sierra Nevadas, about 40 miles away, called Weimar, California.
Right.
And I think that's probably all we need to really get into, other than maybe stating, Rick, the condition that she was found in. What do you think?
I think those details are very well covered in our videos, and I kind of want to get to the meat of this, especially for people just joining us live. We should definitely get into why we're here and why we're doing it live.
Sounds good. All right.
So, yeah, here we go.
All right, lay it on us. Let's hear
drum roll. Yeah.
Yeah.
So as I said, Rex, after you and I picked ourselves back up off the floor, we discussed how we were going to approach talking to Rex, because after the shock wore off, our sleuth hats went on, and we realized that, number one, he could be not telling the truth. Number two, he could be totally telling the truth. Number three, he could be the perpetrator. I mean, we have to factor those things in.
Yeah. So
we had an approach, right?
We did. And so what we decided to do, we interviewed him on separate occasions. And what we were trying to figure out is, does he know any details that were not published on our website or anywhere in the press at the time? That's
yes,
really.
And I should say we do have clips that are coming up of one of our interviews with him.
Correct.
So stick around for that.
Yeah. So so we probed him. We talked to him on the phone the first time. Then we talked to him on Zoom. We tried really hard to trip him up, and we did not succeed at tripping him up, did we, Rick?
No, we were looking for, pauses, or maybe even hearing papers rustle, because like we just talked about a minute ago, our website is full of information about this case. There was nothing we held back because it was 50 years old. So there's every detail about this case that's been public. Some of it's not even been public that we got, through people close to the case somehow. But so we weren't sure. By trying to trip him up, we were trying to see if he had memorized it all. Right.
Right. One of the things about investigating a case that police, I guess it's a new tactic since the 1970s, is they hold everything very, very close to the vest. There's very little information that gets out. In Judy Hakari's case, though it took us some digging to find news clippings and stuff like that, there was a surprising amount of information that was leaked. Not even leaked. It was published. It was made known through the press. And when we first reached out to the cold case detective in Sacramento who is in charge of this case, that's something that she said. She told us, she's like, I'm surprised at how much is out there. So we definitely wanted to trip Rex up. And
Yes. And neither of us really felt that we did that. Now, that doesn't mean a lot. It's just one tool for us to kind of, see what he had to say. But I think we were pretty impressed with the level of detail. I mean, if what he's saying is true, he was 12 years old and he happened upon this scene. It's obvious that it's a traumatic experience for anyone. So it's fused in his brain. So that isn't a surprise that he has a high level of detail. I believe he's 63, 62 now, something like that.
He would be 62 or 63. Yeah, it was 51 years ago.
Right.
What do you think? Maybe we can show kind of, let's set the scene for how Rex kind of came upon the scene. Okay, so what we're looking at right here is the Markston Apartments, and Judy lived here in the Markston Apartments.
Right.
Now, according to Rex, he was at a wrestling match. This was a Saturday, right down here at what is now called Encina Preparatory High. It was Encina High School at the time. He comes out the back and he goes northbound right here on Wayland Avenue, which then jogs over and he goes on to Markston Avenue, and he walks on, as we're looking at it now, the left side, so the west side of the road, because at the time, that's the side that had a sidewalk. There was not a sidewalk on the apartment side.
I'm almost convinced it was the opposite, but maybe I'm not sure. I certainly could be wrong on that.
I mean, that's possible because it does seem like these buildings over here came later, right?
Yeah.
It's possible. But according to what he said, and a 12-year-old's memory is not going to be perfect. However, Rick, he walked that all the time, right? He had wrestling practice down there at the high school.
Right. And he was on his way home, he was almost there. He was only a block away there. We had a couple of revelations with Rex, and I'll explain those right now. What it told us is that there were at least two things that he said that weren't based on the stuff that we know and that we've published, right? And there really isn't a reason for him to deviate from that unless it's what he remembers, right? And that almost lent itself for me to think he was telling the truth, because why would he deviate from what's been published, right?
And I was on the same page on that, and he dug in his heels when we challenged him on that. He goes, I know what was in the news. I was there. I watched the news. The news was wrong. Yeah.
And that's pretty gutsy of him. So the first one that really blew our minds, and in fact, at first we said, no, that's wrong. And he said, nope, the press was wrong. He came home from practice walking up Markston Road, between 4:30 and 5 p.m.
That is what he said. So he's coming up Markston Road. His home, let me just show you, is right here. So he passes the Markston Apartments, crosses over Alta Arden Expressway, which Rick, he said, was new. There just wasn't traffic on it at the time. It was brand new. Yeah. He would come up here. You can kind of see on this satellite view, there is a barricade here, and then the very next house is his.
Right.
So he said that he was doing that at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
He said it was still light. The sun was heading down. I mean, this is March, so daylight savings hadn't kicked in yet, and so he could see, and he was on his way home, and he came upon this scene. Now, there's another thing that flies in the face with this timeline. Kind of blows things up a little bit for us,
Yeah.
So, because a lot of stuff has to happen in order for that timeline to actually be accurate, right? Do you remember what you were thinking?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, the story that we understood was that Ray Willis, who was her fiance, arrived at her apartment late and waited inside for her. And when she didn't arrive and he started to get worried, he went out into the parking lot and he found her car with a door ajar. And then there were signs of a struggle. There were a ripped towel, and things like that. It just was out of the ordinary. So number one, what we kind of thought was, well, don't you think Ray wouldn't he have seen her car when he came in originally?
If Rex's timeline holds, is that what you're saying?
That's right. So if Rex's timeline holds, then Ray should have seen her car in the parking lot. But what he told us in that interview was she wasn't parked near where her apartment was. It was like she got there in the middle of the day and she didn't get her regular parking spot. And so I thought, well, if Ray came in, let me bring up the.
But I will tell you that all of the crime scene information, and I confirmed with Michael Willis that her car, when Ray found her car, it was in her normal carport spot.
Right, which is completely strange.
But the next big surprise that we found with Rex might explain a little bit of that.
Yeah, and we'll get into that. Rex stated that her car was about 5 or 6 spots in from Markston. So it would be kind of where that white car or that gray car, again, I'm completely colorblind.
It's red.
So, that is okay.
And now everybody knows it.
And now everybody knows my handicap. But that's what Rex said, is that the car was on that side of the parking lot. Ray may have come in from the other side and not seen that, I guess. So does one of the clips describes that? Like what he came upon? Yeah, let's go ahead and play that real quick.
All right.
Yeah, I was walking away from Arden Way up toward Alta Arden, and I was not on the apartment side of the street, which had a sidewalk. I was on the other side of the street, which didn't have a sidewalk.
So Rick, I had actually remembered that incorrectly. So there was no sidewalk, but he was still on the other side.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was kind of gravel area and stuff. I was just walking along there, and as I came up toward Alta Arden, where I would have seen the car parked with her in it, I saw her car parked there and another car that was parked kind of behind hers, but it was like the bumper of the car was about where the rear of her car was.
And this clip.
And then I heard him saying, "Come on, Ann," and he called her Ann too. He said, "Come on, Ann, come out of the car. You're coming with us."
Mm-hmm. So big things right there that jump out are, number one, he told us in our interview that he saw 4 men, which right off the bat, it is such a mind-boggling prospect. Now it kind of jives a little bit because they're, we know from all the information, and it's on our website, that the property owner where Judy's body was eventually found later in April, about month and a half later, he did see, a few weeks before Judy's body was found, he did see 3 men dressed just like what Rex told us, dressed nicely, short hair, clean cut, with a shovel and their trunk open. And as he approached, they shut the trunk, and he did give police descriptions. And we have, there are known sketches out there of those 3 men. But I think a lot of people just kind of, passed over it, because 3 men abducting, raping, beating, and killing a woman just seems very, very odd. It's hard to put your brain around that. So now he's saying it's 4 men, which is the other thing that he said to us that flew in the face of what is on the website and what has been in the press. It was always the 3 guys, right? And he described them to a T in great detail.
And we can actually get into that because he talks about that later in our interview. I don't know if you want me to
Yeah.
go
Pull that
there.
up.
Actually, maybe before we go there, we can talk about what he did, because remember, or what he says he did. This is a 12-year-old
Yeah.
boy, and he comes upon this scene where a woman that he knew because he delivered her paper was being surrounded by and harassed by these three gentlemen. So let's go see what Rex says about that.
Yeah, and just before you do that,
Yeah, when I came close, I heard.
Go ahead.
That's okay. In that other clip, I want to mention Rex called her Anne.
Yeah.
And no one that we know, Michael Willis, Ray's son, he never heard anybody call her Anne. That doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot, but that was the first time we ever heard someone call her Anne, which is her middle name.
Well, it means something. I mean, in the newspapers, Wilho and Evelyn said in a couple of places they called her Judy. She wouldn't just run off. That's not our Judy. She would know that she could call. Our Judy would know, stuff like that.
Right.
So we know that her family called her Judy. And when we asked Mike Willis, what did his dad call her? And he said, Judy.
Judy.
Now,
so why would Rex say that, right? But then you heard in that last clip that the guy who was leaning into her car called her Anne as well. So let's go ahead and roll that so we can
kind of interesting, yeah.
Show everybody. Yeah, it's really bizarre.
Yeah, when I came closer, I heard him saying, come on, Ann, come out of the car. You're coming with us. And I heard her saying, I'm not going with you anywhere. And so then, and the guys that were behind this front man, they started stepping forward a little bit. Well, at that point, I realized that there was something going on that didn't look right. And I reached down and grabbed up some rocks, and I started throwing at the guys. And as soon as I started throwing rocks at the car, the lady come bolting out of the car. And when she come bolting out of the car, the first guy that was the one I was aiming at, and I hit him a couple of times, and he bounced about 5 feet backwards off the car. Then the other two guys that were standing behind him, they were all like standing about parallel at that time, and they kind of started coming forward a little bit like they might be coming after me. By that time, Ann was coming out, and I reached out and grabbed her hand and said, come on, come with me, and we started running across Alta Arden and up Markston Road.
Seriously, if you even remotely believe him, that gives you chills, because there's never been any information about what happened and what she went through moments before she was taken.
Oh yeah, it's like she just kind of disappeared, right? The last time she was seen. Now, one of the kind of chinks in the armor of this story is that, according to some news reports we found, there apparently was a witness who placed her at the hospital, leaving the hospital that night. Late. Yeah. So, but he's sticking to that timeline.
Eyewitnesses are. That kind of stuff. Those are, you know what I mean? That kind of stuff is really, it's fleeting. But I get what you're saying. That's why we had it in our head, a whole different timeline up until we spoke to him. But the fact that not only was he a witness, he was a participant in trying to help her escape her abductors. Wow. And let me tell you, I don't know if I would have had the I'll just say fortitude at 12 to start throwing rocks at a bunch of guys. You know what I mean?
Oh, I certainly wouldn't have.
Pretty incredible.
Yeah, it is really incredible. Now the next clip that I want to show. So he grabs her hand, says, "Come on, let's run." Mm-hmm. The next clip we're going to show actually kind of jibes with evidence that is later found. So let me play that for you guys.
Yeah. Just looked like she was trying to get away and something was going on, and I could tell she was scared, because when I reached back and grabbed her hand and said, "Run with me," I could feel her trembling. I knew whatever was going on, something wasn't right. I didn't really know what was up. So we're running up Markston Road, and she started she wasn't being able to run very fast because, she had those shoes on. The shoes were like white shoes that had short heels. There was no strap on them. They were just like you slip your foot into it, and the heel was not like a big high heel, and it was just like a short heel. And I would say probably like leather type, difficult to run in. almost dragging her along because I could run faster. And I told her, you know, get rid of the shoes. And she kicked off the shoes, and then she bent down and picked up one of them, and we kept running.
Okay, Rick.
So why is that such a big deal there, Kevin?
I was going to ask you the same thing.
Oh, were you?
No. Okay, this is why it's important, because 7 weeks later, when Judy Hakari was found, she, in her grave, was one shoe. It was described as a nurse's saddle shoe. And when we looked that up, his description is
Even better than what we found.
yeah. That
Very
is
accurate.
That is a saddle shoe. And they never found the other shoe, which made me kind of wonder, when police came to the crime scene, is that something that they found and never let out into the press?
Yeah, you know, if we're talking, if this timeline and story from Rex is true, there was more than one person there, and they were clearly cleaning up after themselves. You know what I mean? And she may have thrown it off into the bush, and nobody, somebody may have found it later and didn't know it was important. I don't know. There's so many different factors
run
there.
Over
but
by cars a couple times, and it's just looking like junk. When he told me that, I actually got the chills a little bit, and I think you and I were kind of texting each other. That's not good etiquette, but we were kind of texting each other at the time, and I was just like,
"It certainly is. It's doing our job."
I guess, yeah.
Yeah. No, it was pretty profound, and in fact, and again, we will say that information was public. It's on our website, so it doesn't prove anything, but again, his level of detail and how he doesn't. I mean, you can see in the interview, those of you who are watching this, he doesn't pause. The guy's very confident in what he knows. It's just another thing that added to his credibility as far as we're concerned. He could certainly still be a lunatic. Sorry, Rex, if you're watching this.
Yeah.
But like I said, our experience with him, he seemed very credible. Now, there was one more thing found in her grave with her in the bag, and he explains that. You want to cue that up?
You got it.
There's one thing I had completely forgotten about for all these years. Even when I was a young adult, I didn't remember. A key piece of information was that I was wearing nowadays you'd call it a hoodie.
Right.
But back then they just called it a sweat jacket, zip up.
Yeah.
And I was carrying a school towel.
Right.
And when we were running away, by the time the car, guys had jumped into the men had jumped into the car and came up Markson Road there, and one guy jumped out of the car. The two guys on the driver's side came out of the car, like shoved it and parked the driver, and the guy was sitting behind him, and because it was a four-door car, came out, and the first, one guy grabbed her real quick. Well, I felt her hand go loose, and I looked behind, and I seen that she had been grabbed. And then I felt something tug me from behind, and apparently probably had a hold of that hood.
Right.
And I just kind of turned around and bent over and stuck my hands forward like that, and it came off.
Yeah.
And I would have had that towel shoved in that hoodie pocket.
So that he just perfectly described what was found in Judy's grave.
Now, we didn't include it in the clips that we're showing today, but in the entire interview, we kind of pressed him on the hoodie because it's only been described as a gray zip front sweat jacket, right? They didn't describe it as a hoodie. That's a modern term. It was zip up front, two pockets, and a hood. Now, when I was a kid, I had like this summer job at Denio's in Roseville, California, where I sold, of all things, like t-shirts and sweatshirts. I worked at this booth, and so I knew that there are like a wide variety of gray when it comes to sweatshirts. So I pressed him on that, and he described it pretty well as to exactly what it is, to the point where that was not anywhere in the press, but the police would know that. So
Yeah, and the other thing that he said in that clip that was very interesting to you and I is that he had a school towel in his pocket. He had just been wrestling. Makes perfect sense that he would have that, right? In fact, he had said that he did it all the time. His stepmother used to yell at him for bringing him home, right?
Right.
And so one of the things that was found in Judy's car were strips of towels that I don't know if this was majorly published like in the Sacramento Bee newspaper or anything, but they did describe the towel, and it did fit the description of like a gym towel.
Yeah, it was a cotton, like ribbed towel, and remnants of that towel were found in her car. Mm-hmm. They also were found in her grave. One of them was on her neck, but it looked like it had fallen there, like it wasn't used.
It wasn't used as
to
a ligature
strangle
or
her. Yeah,
right.
It was just in there, but she had, she had been bound. Her hands and feet had been bound with that towel.
Right. And it could make sense. Again, I'm trying to fit two timelines here because the alternate ending, I guess, of this would be if Rex is correct, there's a possibility that Ray was involved, but we don't believe that. So, but we've tried to see what kind of situation would have to happen in order for both timelines to fit. Right. And if there were, 4 men, and they were trying to clean up after themselves, they would have grabbed that sweatshirt. They would have grabbed her shoe, right? And the towel, they could have used it afterwards, with her or in her car. They could have moved her car where it eventually was found. I mean, there's a lot of stuff there that actually, again, corroborates Rex's story.
Yeah. Now, did we play the clip of him already describing the men? I don't think we have.
No, I don't think we have. Let's go ahead.
Should we play that?
Absolutely, yeah.
They had on, all of them had on white shirts. The one that was right up to the car talking to Ann had a tie on, and it was a dark colored tie, I believe. And they had slacks on that were either like dark blue or black. And the guy that was up by the car had kind of a chubby looking face. They all three looked young. None of them had beard. They were all clean cut, well groomed, like almost like detectives or something. They're, businessmen. Okay. Because back in those days, a lot of guys had long hair. None of these guys had long hair. Out of the two that were in the back, one of the guys was white and the other guy was a little bit tan.
So it's interesting, we can't go too deep into this, but it's interesting how he describes them and then says almost like they were detectives, because you pressed him pretty hard on the description of the two cars when we talked to him. Yeah. And what was the thing that he said that was on both the license plates?
Okay. So what he said on those license plates, he remembered part of the license plate, and it started with a diamond, like a black diamond shape with an E in the middle of it. Now, what that means in California, it's probably very similar in other states, is exempt. So it doesn't need to pay, the regular road taxes. Now, the only vehicles that have those are government vehicles, but everything from school buses to, CHP cars and everywhere in between, Caltrans. Yeah, it could be school truancy officers.
Plus, it's the state capital. It could be state vehicles.
Correct.
So it doesn't say, but it also includes police.
It does include police.
So,
which may be the reason why he felt like, hey, maybe they're detectives. They're wearing white shirts. They're wearing ties. They're in a car with an exempt license plate.
Yeah. I mean, this kind of stuff throws us because it's so mind-boggling that a young 22-year-old nurse would be caught up in something. Clearly, they were familiar with her if they called her Ann and they said, "You're coming with us." And they sent 4 men to get one little petite girl, right? So it just, it boggles the mind trying to figure out a scenario where that would be happening.
Now, one of those men, Rick, he described as having a round face. And what did we learn about round face man?
Well, again, we don't want to point any fingers. I mean, this is a long time ago, and we certainly don't know anything about this. But Rex actually brought it up later that he thought that it looked like the man who eventually, I think like 6 months later, would become the sheriff of Sacramento County. And I don't want to use names at the moment. I mean, we just so everybody knows, this interview that we did, we've taken a little bit of time and done our due diligence, and we've turned it over to law enforcement. I've had conversations with the lead detective on this case, so we made sure that all that was done before we did this. Just this has all happened real recently, and so we're not trying to stir stuff up. We're just passing along our thoughts, on this to see what shakes down. I mean, it's almost 51 years ago, so even if those guys were law enforcement somehow, odds are they're all not around anymore.
That's correct. Now we've gotten his description of the three of the four men.
Right.
Why don't we listen to his description of the fourth man?
Great.
So the next thing is we're running up the street. Well, I guess these men had jumped in this car, but apparently all three of them didn't jump in that first car that I saw that was parked where it was kind of blocking her in. Only two of them jumped in there, because when that car came up Markston Road, apparently they jumped in the car, came out of that parking lot and came up Markston Road. And when they come up Markston Road and jumped out, there was only three men, but only two of them were the professionally dressed, the guy that was driving and the guy that was on the passenger side. And there was another guy in the back seat that I didn't see originally, and he's the one that grabbed her, and he was not professionally dressed. He was wearing like jeans and a button-up shirt that was untucked.
So this is this is the fourth man.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he also had longer hair. He wasn't clean cut and everything like the other guys.
Okay.
He had longer hair, and he might have had, it didn't really look like he had a beard, but it might have looked like he had a stubble growth to represent a beard.
I mean, this stuff is just amazing.
So we've got three men, clean cut, one man not.
Yep.
I don't know what that means.
Well, again, if he was just recanting what he maybe memorized or saw on the paper or whatever, why would he add that wild card if it wasn't the truth? That's where I am.
I'm with you that I try to go to people's motivations. I mean, what would be Rex's motivation to reach out to us 51 years later? And it's I mean, to be fair to Rex, he has tried to tell people this story.
Yes. In fact, that's a good place for us to mention that. I neglected to mention that at the beginning. We, of course, asked Rex, why now? Why didn't you call the police? I mean, he was a little kid, but he wasn't a toddler. He was 12. Why didn't you call police? Why didn't you, that kind of thing. And and we can explain a lot of those details later. But the biggest one, I think, was that at the time, Rex's father was a former sheriff's officer, deputy in Plumas County, which is more north of Sacramento. It's a very rural area, woodsy. And so his dad kind of took the stance, because remember, at the time, this was just an abduction. I don't want to say just an abduction, but it wasn't a murder. So, odds are his dad could have thought his son was just farting around or over-exaggerating, and maybe he thought it was a domestic thing and he didn't want to get involved. And that's what he told Rex, I don't want you involved in this. It's just keep your nose out of it, that kind of a thing.
On the other hand, in the 1970s in Sacramento, there was a crime spree happening in many different ways. I mean, young women were being murdered with frequency, and there was a big influx of organized crime. And that's actually something that's very easy to find and look up, that Sacramento had a couple of crime families move in and there were lots of problems. Maybe his dad just didn't want him to get in trouble with what could really be actual trouble, Right.
Exactly. Yeah. So it didn't escalate from Rex's side. I mean, when he first reached out to us, that was the first thing, why are you now doing this 51 years later? And he said that he's getting older. He lives in the Midwest now, and that he didn't want to die with that knowledge without sharing it. And so it was, for us, we were both, I think, extremely impressed that he reached out to us before he reached out to the press or to law enforcement. But we did tell him that we were sharing, his information with law enforcement, and he didn't blink at that, by the way.
Yeah, he invited that. He wanted that. But getting back to my idea of motivation, right? What would be a person's motivation to tell a story that is vastly similar with 2 or 3 very specific digging in my heels differences? What's the motivation to do that 51 years later? I'm kind of thinking, I'm leaning toward, I think he's telling us the truth. Now, it could be an embellished 12-year-old vision of the world truth. But
yeah,
I mean, that's possible.
He sounds very accurate, and we all, I think, I had mentioned to you that, there are stories I've told, over the years, things that have happened in the past. And I guarantee that I have altered them to make them funnier.
Sure.
And I now, that's my memory, right? I remember it that way, but I don't know how many times this Rex told this story. I don't think he's told it very, very much.
Yeah. Now, getting back to what you were alluding to earlier is, okay, to make those timelines not match, but to explain the timeline difference between what Ray Willis said and what Rex has said, one of the possibilities is that Ray may have been involved.
Yeah, we struggled with that for a few days, didn't we?
We did. Now, you actually talked to his son, Mike, and even brought that up, which I thought displayed a certain amount of chutzpah. But what did Mike have to say?
Well, I mean, if the roles were reversed, I would definitely want to know. And he was very, he's pretty far removed from this now. His dad passed away, I think, about 5 years ago. He and his brother are this is a very interesting story to them. It's what happened to their dad. It's a big thing that their dad talked about with them their entire lives. So I actually got on a conference call with both brothers, and Michael's other brother is older than him, and he remembers a few things that more. So their response was, which I have a lot of respect for, they said, look, we don't think that he was involved, but if it turns out that's the case, we'd rather have the truth. We don't want to believe a lie, and we don't want to ignore facts. And so odds are there are no facts that are going to come out of this. You and I both wrapped our brains around, we let ourselves go down the rabbit hole a little bit. We started talking about, well, maybe he had gambling debt. Maybe he was involved with the mob. I mean, there's so many things, but he was a student living at home still. This wasn't a guy who was staying out till 4 a.m. You know what I mean? So it's just, it's so difficult. It's so difficult to nail down 51 years later. I mean, man, aren't there times that you wish that we could just drive over and look in dumpsters and,
Right. Yeah. That's, with such an old case, it becomes less and less likely that there will be a resolution to it. But we opened the video this way, that we really hoped when we started this little adventure that if we did it right and we got all the information together, someday somebody might see it. And in my mind, I was thinking some, middle-aged guy is in the attic of crazy Uncle Jerry who was just kind of off, and they are going through his things after he passes away, and they find a driver's license or a credit card that says Judith Ann Hakari or Judy A. Hakari, and they'll go to the internet and say, who is this person, and find out, right?
Yeah.
Those are the
kinds
of things
on our website, we have a list of things that are missing.
Yeah.
Like her purse and her driver's license. So, solvecrimes.tv is our website, and there's a case file, with a crime line, all that kind of stuff too. So, so you're right. That is exactly. And I mean, we never imagined that an unknown eyewitness would come out like this. And like you said, what are people's motives? I mean, the way I always put it is, to what end is kind of how I put it. Like what is the point? End game here? Yeah. So, I think Rex waited way too long, in my opinion. I think he thinks that as well. Life took over and had kids and all those kind of things. But I didn't think Rex existed. So could there be someone who hears about this and listens to Rex's story and the details and it jogs someone's memory? Heck, I hope so.
Yeah,
I really do.
It's possible. And I hope that something like that happens, that somebody watching this video or the other videos that we've done, or they find us on our website, solvecrimes.tv, they will see this picture of Judy Hakari and say, I think I remember something about that. We really hope that that does happen. And, and I'm even, Rick, I have renewed optimism that something like that will happen. When we started this, we really kind of thought it's an outside chance that somebody would reach out to us, and it happened 5 months in or 6 months in or something like that. So,
yeah, well, as far as an eyewitness, I know there's one more clip that he goes into a little more detail about when, after they ran across Alta Arden, they were caught by these men. They drove across. He and Judy ran across. It's not graphic, but it's upsetting. But it's not too graphic. There's no gore or anything, but it's a pretty intense. That's kind of where I'm getting his recollection. So let's go ahead and play that.
They had tried to get me and they didn't get me, and I bent down, picked up rocks and started throwing rocks at him. The main guy, he had come up to the barricade and was acting like he was going to come through the barricade, but then he didn't come through the barricade because I was throwing rocks at him. Okay. The other guy that was on the passenger side, he came out of the car, but he didn't get very far. He didn't try to come after me. He didn't try to run away from the car. He was staying right there by the car. And he was the one that I felt must have been in charge or something, because he yelled out, forget it, leave him, come on, we got to go. And the guy that had come all the way up to the barricade that was the driver went back, jumped in the car. The other guy that was still standing by the car, he jumped in the front of the car on the passenger side. And the guy that had grabbed Ann Hakari, I saw him struggling. I couldn't see her because he had pushed her down below the level of the seat. But apparently she might have been struggling or something, because I seen him pushing down with his arms like something was going on. Then I seen him raise his hand and I was pretty sure that he hit her with his fist. And that guy was in front of, that had been, in the rear passenger seat. He was kind of sitting back and acting like he was a little bit relaxed, like he wasn't struggling to hold her down or anything. So I've always thought that when he raised his fist and punched, he must have knocked her out.
I mean, that's very upsetting, right?
It is. And it kind of, what's also very upsetting about it is that we know the condition that she was found in. And you can go back and watch the videos. It's from the very, very beginning. One of the detectives that worked the crime scene, he described her condition as one of the most god-awful, savage beatings he had ever seen. And so when she was found, her jaw was broken in 2 places. Her teeth were knocked out. She had received a savage beating. And that's the word of the detective back in 1970. Right. It was a savage beating. And it appears that maybe Rex witnessed the beginning of that beating.
Certainly sounds like it. And so again, yet another small corroboration with his story. So it is very upsetting, but it's fascinating to me to hear firsthand all we knew was, and all anyone knew, literally anyone except for Rex, thought she disappeared. Could have been one guy, right? Threw her in the back of his car and drove off. I mean, to hear someone describing what he saw that night or that day it's just fascinating. And I don't know where this is going. It at the very least, it's now on the record and will be moving forward. It's going to depend on how people react to this video. We may do another one of these we have I mean, we interviewed him for over an hour and a half. There's a lot of detail in there, and we may do that, but
Well, and we interviewed him 2 separate times. So
Right,
the
right.
first one was on the phone, and we got his permission to record the audio on that, and then the video. So we probably got more like 2.5 hours worth of recordings with Rex, and we may bring that back to the channel. But we certainly hope that if you've been watching this, that you will go back. That the Judith Ann Hakari case is the very first case that Rick and I worked
we'll
on.
post some links inside the description down below.
Yeah, we will. Go back and check them out. And one more thing, I think, Rick, before we wrap up, I want to go back to how do we make the timelines work. So we said one of the options would be that Ray was in on it, right?
Yeah.
The other option is that maybe Ray didn't see her car where it was parked before. He came in a different way. The other thing that I was thinking is, well, you and I have discussed this since we talked with Rex, is maybe they took her car and brought it back for some reason.
It could very well be. I mean, they may have, I mean, especially if they were law enforcement, they may have taken it and made sure it was clean. Right? Clean. They may have wiped it all down, right? Because we have not heard, at least in public, we have not heard if they found fingerprints or anything that weren't Judy's or Ray's in the car. We don't even know if they fingerprinted it, to be honest with you. I mean, it's 1970. I have no idea. I would hope so.
Well, they would be fingerprinting in 1970, but if they
No,
did,
I know, but I mean, who knows if they actually did, if they went that far, I don't know.
But if they did, they did not let that out in the media that we can find.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
We'd love to hear some theories from you guys.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Let us know what you think. And
and also if you're like the how fascinating this thing is. I mean, that's why we did this live, because it was so mind-blowing having a 51-year-old cold case murder have an eyewitness all of a sudden pop up. I mean, it's pretty amazing. I mean, we're so over the moon about that, having the website with all the details about her, and having this the video series on our channel has actually brought this to fruition. I mean, it's pretty incredible. I mean, I'm amazed.
Pretty happy about that. So that's probably a good place to wrap it up, don't you think, Rick?
I think so. Yep.
I was just going to say one more time, if you haven't subscribed to the channel and you want to support us, a like and a subscribe really, really helps. Comments really help. It helps for the YouTube algorithm to kind of pick us up. We're a brand new channel, and we really want other people who like content like this to find us. So
well, not just that, it actually does help us to help other people. I mean, that's the greatest thing about this channel from both of our points of view, right?
Yeah, we named this channel Solve Crimes. We don't want to talk about crimes. We don't want to talk about crimes that other people have solved. We want to help solve crimes. So the more eyeballs on it, the better.
Well, thank you everybody who joined us live, and for those of you who watch it after it's not live anymore. And thanks, Gavin. That was great.
Yeah, thanks, Rick, and thanks everybody. Have a good one.